and what's going on there. There's really, as you recall from the end of chapter 3, Jesus was baptized by John in the Jordan River, and then the heavens parted, and God, issued that recognition that he was his son, and he was pleased with him and what he did, what he was doing. So that's kind of where we're picking up, Matthew chapter 4. Let's read some of that, and then let's read Matthew chapter 4. Let's read about the first 11 verses. Somebody want to read the first 5 there? 6, verse 6.
Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. The tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." Jesus answered, "It is written, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. "If you are the Son of God," he said, "throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that you do not strike your foot against a stone." Keep going.
Read one more.
Jesus answered him, "It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test."
All right, somebody read a couple, read to 11, 8 to 11.
Again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. "All this I will give you," he said, "if you will bow down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." Then the devil left him, and angels came and attended him.
All right, so that's the basis of the first part of this Matthew chapter 4. And we're going to talk about these two events, this event, in a little bit more detail. I don't know if you can see this or not. Me and Jerry must have been thinking along the same line that we needed a map, because I saw when he put up a map today, I said, wow, he must have been thinking like me, or I was thinking like him. But I get a little confused about all the cities and the movement around of Jesus and where all this stuff happened, and I think if you can get a picture of the geography, the locations, where everything's at, it kind of helps things. It helps a little bit, okay? So let's start out. The Sea of Galilee. This is right here, up here at the top of this. Sea of Galilee is fed in by the Jordan River up to the north, and it goes through. That feeds into the Sea of Galilee, and then it goes on down all the way into the Dead Sea. So you can see that, keep that in mind, this is the Sea of Galilee up here at the top. The beginning of this chapter talks about Naphtali and Zebulun. Those are two of the tribes of Israel, and when he was talking about the Galilee this morning in our lesson, he's talking about the northern part of Israel. It's up here at the top. If I talk to Kathy, I always say up when I say north. It's up at the top. She's terrible with geography anyway, so it's up at the top. All right. Some of the land here is very beautiful. It's on the lake here next to this Sea of Galilee. Tiberias is where Herod set up the capital city of Israel when he was running things, and it's named after an emperor of that time. But most of the things that we're talking about here in this Matthew chapter 4 are happening down in the southern part of this area of Israel. So Bethany is where Jesus was baptized. It was around in this area here that he was baptized, and it says right after he was baptized, it says he went off into the desert. Well, the desert that we're talking about is probably in this southern area right here around where the Dead Sea is. That's all desert right in that area. And part of Jerusalem is evidently considered part of that desert there. This is the Judean, I think I've got it on there, the Judean desert is kind of where that's at. It's also where, you know, John the Baptist was doing his baptizing. When Jesus went out to be baptized, it was, you know, he went into this area. This is all part of that same important area. And notice that, you know, down here is the Red Sea. It's not on the map. So that's where, you know, Israel wandered in the wilderness for 40 years after they crossed the Red Sea. And it's down in this area below there. And of course, Africa, where we're talking about here, is over here. So, or in Egypt. Egypt is over here. So, notice where Jerusalem is. It's in the southern part. It's in the Judea part of Israel. And then, of course, Jericho is where, remember what happened right in here, they crossed the Jordan River on dry land again. So, all this stuff is happening right here. When it says Jesus went into Galilee, he's talking about going up this area right here, up in here. And Capernaum is where Jesus kind of said that's his hometown. When he started his ministry, we start up here in Capernaum in that area. So, of course, Nazareth is there. That's where, you know, nothing good. Jerry pointed that out this morning in his discussion. So, all right. Jordan River, straight down, Sea of Galilee. This is where Jesus was baptized. And then Jericho, this is kind of where they came across into the promised land in that area. Does that help you guys see that?
Yes.
It helps me when I'm thinking about this thing, this temptation, this events that happen here. Now, like I said, the events that we're talking about in Matthew chapter 4 is in that Judean desert. It's west of the Jordan River and the Dead Sea, likely the same place that John the Baptist appeared and was doing his baptism. Now, one of the questions that I was pondering as I was reading about this is Jesus is out in the desert, he's fasting, and he's by himself. Who's telling this story? How did Matthew and the apostles, I mean, there's only one way that they knew this story, right? And that would be that Jesus came back and told them about it. I think that's a little bit ironic that it wasn't like Jesus was bragging, right? Jesus wouldn't brag about the battle or that he had with the devil out in the desert. What do you think he thought? What was the purpose for telling him about these three temptations? And then again, second step, what do you think the purpose was for Matthew then to relay that in his gospel? What do you think the purpose was? Or what did it accomplish?
He overcame the devil.
He overcame the devil. Yeah. He overcame the devil. Yeah. What else?
For me, it's significant that even Jesus was tempted. Even Jesus felt temptation.
Right.
I find comfort in that.
Yeah. And I think I want to talk a little bit more about temptation and testing in just a minute. But, well, let's do it now. So, the devil was trying to tempt Jesus, right? And the temptation, there's a little bit of different scenario with being tempted by something. You tempt someone with something or you test someone. To me, there's a slight difference. And when you're testing someone, you're really wanting them to succeed. You want them to pass the test, generally. If you put something before somebody to tempt them, you're trying to get them to fail. So the devil may have put these out as temptations, but I don't think God this is where we get into the theological discussion about whether God tempts us or like, so that's really where I'm after with this discussion. Carl?
So know we've discussed in the past that if Satan really knew what was gonna happen after the crucifixion, he probably would not have,
It wouldn't pushed him that far.
wouldn't push him that far. So does Satan really understand or know who Jesus is at this point when he is tempting him? Does he really understand who he is and know the power that he has and, you know?
Yeah.
Because if he understood that Jesus really was God, what would be the point of even trying to tempt him?
Well, look, the first two temptations that we have there, he starts it out by saying what? If you are, what? The Son of God. So do you think Satan didn't know he was the Son of God?
He wanted to find out for sure.
That he tested him to find out? Yeah.
Well, I look at it like this, the devil was an angel, right? And something had tempted him, he had fallen.
Yeah.
So it was like, it happened to me, let's see if it can happen, let's see what I can do.
Okay.
But how can he not have recognized that was Jesus? Like, he knew who God was. I just have a hard time with like that language, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that he knew. I don't know if I know the answer to that, but I do think he wanted to find out. He was trying to. All right, so we're going to talk. Steve's going to talk in a little bit about Satan, so I don't want to get too deep into that. But Satan's ways of getting mankind to fall are pretty common, right? I mean, he's done the same thing in the past, right? So let's hold that discussion about who Satan is a little bit. But the temptations that he put before him are the same. Yes.
I guess one way I kind of always read this is that Satan was trying to figure out just how much power God had given to Jesus in his human form. Like he knew who he was in heaven,
Right.
but he didn't know how much power God had given him in his human form, and that's what Satan wanted to know.
Right. So that's a great point. I think that's a great point. Part of this temptation is really also trying to show the human side of Jesus as also the divine side. He was trying to figure that out. I mean, was he truly God or was he not? That's one question. And then the other question is, was he human? Was he really just God, without a human side to him? So there's a lot of that going on in this discussion. We're going to talk more about this next bullet here. Is that he's fasting 40 days, and there's nothing I would say that's like coincidences in the Bible. I think some of the facts we're given want us to think about something meaningful in it. The 40 days is meaningful, and I've got a chart here on the next slide that we'll talk about that. But the 40 days, comparing it to 40 days, 40 years in the wilderness, he's showing how Jesus faced the same temptations that the children of Israel faced, and where they failed, he is successful. So after 40 days of being in the wilderness, he passed the test.
The perfect Israelite.
What? He's a perfect Israelite. Yep, he's a perfect Israelite. All right. Any more on that context? All right. So here's the three temptations, and we'll walk through these, and we'll even read some of the results of some of the responses he gave Satan. Number one was stones to bread. All right. Now, he said stones to bread. Have we heard that? Jesus turning stones into something else, just in the chapter 4. What was it that he said?
Sons of Abraham.
Yeah, if he wanted to make disciples, he could turn these stones into disciples, right? So this idea of Jesus having the power to turn stones into something else is something that Satan picked up on. he's also picking up and trying to create this idea in the human side of Jesus that, hey, he is the king. A king, somebody in royalty shouldn't be running around hungry. If you're the true king, son of God, and divine, you should be having plenty of food. And so turn these stones into bread and make yourself what you really should have. He's tempting him with his physical needs and trying to appeal to his selfishness. And for us, that's what we face too. The materialistic side of who we are. Sometimes we'll tell ourselves, I really deserve whatever it is. That's who I should, I'm somebody and I should have this. Let's look at Deuteronomy 8, 1 through 6. Somebody want to read that for us? This is what Jesus responded to him with. Deuteronomy 8. Somebody want to read, or do you want me to?
Yeah, be careful to follow every command I'm giving you today, so that you may live and increase and may enter and possess the land the Lord promised on oath to your ancestors. Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness these 40 years, to humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep his commands. He humbled you, causing you to hunger, and then feeding you with manna, which neither you nor your ancestors had known, to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Your clothes did not wear out, and your feet did not swell during these 40 years. Know then in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, so the Lord your God disciplines you. Observe the commands of the Lord your God, walking in obedience to him and revering him. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with brooks, streams, and deep springs, gushing out into the valleys and hills, a land with wheat and barley, vines and fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil, and honey, a land where bread will not be scarce, and you will lack nothing, a land where the rocks are iron, and you can dig copper out of the hills.
All right, so this is where Jesus is quoting and responding to this idea that he should turn these stones into bread. You see the 40 years that he's referring back to, that, you were out in the wilderness for 40 years, and you didn't do all these things, but then, the other part of that is, even though I did all these things for you, you still failed me. You still didn't keep my commandments and follow me. But when Jesus is faced with the same temptation of hunger, he came through and did not succumb to that temptation. All right, number 2. Testing of God's protection. So the next one is where he says that, he appeals to his physical safety, and, again, he's talking to him like he's a king, and if, the Bible says that the angels will take care of you, make sure that not anything's going to ever happen to you. So just throw yourself down and see if God will really do that. See if God really will keep his promise to you. And that comes from Deuteronomy 8:16 is his response. Let's read that, Deuteronomy 6. Somebody want to read that one?
Do not put the Lord your God to the test as you did at Massah. Be sure to keep the commands of the Lord your God and the stipulations and decrees he has given you.
Okay. Yep. So there again, he's talking about, again, another test that they had failed in the past, that he is going to succeed and come down. All right. And then the last one, the ruling all kingdoms, worldly power, compromise, the timing of Jesus, timing of God. He wanted him to take a shortcut to the power. I think Jesus likely knew that he was gonna, he knew what his role was gonna be. But Satan was tempting him to bypass all the pain, all the agony, all the suffering that he was gonna have to go through and go directly to ruling the world. Now, one of the questions I have about this is, did Satan have the ability to give him that power?
I think so.
Yeah, he's the prince of the earth.
Did what?
Isn't he the prince of the earth?
Prince of the earth, yeah. He got that power from, where did he get it?
You gave it to him.
We gave it to him, or did God give it to him? God allows him to run rampant in our world, I guess.
In Job, this morning I did doing the Bible recap, and it was talking about how when Satan entered the picture and God allowed Satan to do all those things to Job within the sovereignty of his will. Of course, he said, like, the one thing you can't do is you can't lay hands on him.
Right.
But that was, I mean, I don't think it's unrealistic to think that the devil is at work, and I think that God allows some of that but he does it within his power, within his sovereignty.
So I notice this over here, and this is where I've got Steve coming up here to shed some light on Satan here in a minute. But Matthew 16:23 is where Jesus is telling him that he was going to die and suffer. It's really kind of related to this temptation. This is the stuff that Satan was tempting Jesus not to go through with that and just get all the power in the world today. And Peter said, hey, no, you look that verse up. It says, no, that not going to happen. We're not going to let that happen. And Jesus' response was to call him Satan. Get behind me, Satan. So this is where I'm going to ask Steve to step up and kind of talk about who Satan is. All right? He's got a hand up. Give me a hand up.
Yeah, please. Steve Bill, special assignment. Gerald and I are doing something a little different these weeks ahead. I hope you all can appreciate it. Sure enough, Gerald is going to take the class, and I am on special assignment, and so we've got some special things maybe that need a little more attention, and we'll work through these as we go. Gerald, when you assigned this to me, I thought I had a couple of hours and I could deal with this. And this is 4 hours, and it doesn't begin to be what it needs to be. In fact, there's things in here I disagree with already, all right? But just work with me for just a moment on this. This whole idea of who Satan is, what is Satan, what are Satan's powers, it's very intriguing, and it's a whole study in and of itself. The earliest thought of who Satan is really comes in Genesis. The temptation in chapter 3, where who I believe is the devil is depicted as a serpent. And we have what many people refer to as a proto-gospel. It's the earliest idea of what gospel is, which is the verse in 3:15 that basically talks about Jesus being bruised on the heel. That's how we interpret it. But the old snake's going to get it on the head, all right? Which is not a good thing. All right? At least not if you're Satan. But when you start looking at depictions of Satan throughout the Old Testament, there's really very few. The single thing that's most descriptive of Satan is the Job text. And you were talking about Job 1:6. where in fact Satan is depicted as one of the sons of God, who are, if you will, they are in this inner group with God in heaven, all right? And they have this conversation, and that's where Job depicts the conversation occurring, where in fact Job is tempted by the devil, and they are certainly temptations. He tempts him, very interesting, we don't have time to talk about what those temptations are, but how those temptations match up with Jesus' temptations are pretty interesting as well. But if you look at most of the uses of devil or Satan in the Old Testament, it's basically an idea that a Satan, or the Satan, is an adversary. It's somebody that's in an adversarial role. And I've got you a couple of passages. The main one there is Numbers 22. And that is where the angel becomes an adversary to Balaam. Okay? Balaam is talking to this, I'll use the word donkey, okay? And, he slaps the donkey around a few times, in which case the angel interrupts that slapping about. And the angel there is referred to in terms that basically is Satan. He became a Satan because he was an adversary. What we can get from Job, what we conclude from Job about Satan is that Satan's power is limited. He only acts within God's permission. And there are multiple other passages that you can look up. And I listed two, one in Zechariah and one in 1 Chronicles, where clearly what Satan does and what Satan can do are limited by what God allows him to do. I'll let you read those. And then I've got a section in here that's very, very interesting to me. It's this idea of intertestamental literature. Now, I've read some of this a long time ago, stuff like Jubilee and stuff like Adam and Eve and any number of books that were written at that time that did not make it into our scripture. And they're very, very interesting. And the couple of books that I was read, and both of them refer to this. And over on the left, I wrote just a little bit of history there. We know that 587 BC, that the northern and southern kingdom both had fallen, okay? And that shortly thereafter, Cyrus with Persia took over Babylon. We got 330 Alexander the Great. 142, we've got the Hasmonean Revolt, where for a brief time Israel had some independence, but then we've got the fall to Rome in 63 BC, and then of course we know that goes up to 70 AD when the Romans come in and basically raise Jerusalem, and from there on out we've got Israel as we knew it outside of modern times is gone. It's ruined. So we've got there a period of 400 years. You can add it up, probably more than that. Looks more like about 600 years, where we have the people of Israel who are basically dominated by some foreign power. That's the deal. We've got a period of incredible darkness where the people begin to ask, why is this happening to us? And a lot of people have the idea that during that time a lot is being written to explain why what is happening to us. And a lot of the explanation comes up in a number of stories about the devil. So we've got to understand that there is an understanding from the Old Testament in Job that there is a Satan, okay? Satan's a bad guy, all right? We've got to understand that that's there. But we've also got to understand that there's a lot of, I'll call it, imagination, poetic license, whatever, that takes place in this intertestamental period where a lot is developed about who Satan is and where Satan came from. Very, very interesting to me. So I put some passages down, the New Testament, intertestamental literature, intratestamental literature down below, where you compare some things, and there's a million comparisons. I just wrote down a couple. I wrote a point, look at the very last bullet. It says, New Testament says nothing about Satan rebelling against God. That is wrong. That is a wrong statement. I wrote that last night, and then I read Revelation 12. And Revelation 12, when you read it, interpret Revelation 12 like I think most people interpret Revelations 12, there was a war up there, and Satan got cast down to earth, okay? Satan got cast down to earth, and Satan has been chasing God's people since. That's kind of what Revelations 12 says. So be careful. In fact, I'd like you to mark that. Steve Bill says that's not true. But you can go into, again, this intertestamental literature and read some stuff about that where you understand it all. Because they understood it all. But it didn't make it to the Bible, so I'm not sure they understood anything, okay? And I wrote, just because the devil was envious of God making man in his image. This is very interesting. God made man in his image, and at some point in time, and this is in the writing, I don't know what it's called, a gospel, but the story of Adam and Eve, okay? That is a book. But at some point in time, the devil was asked by Michael to worship the image of God within man, and the devil says, I'm thinking the devil said, hell no. Maybe he didn't. But anyway, the devil says, I'm not going to go there, okay? And so at that point in time, the devil was cast down to earth. That's how it happened, okay? Because whoever wrote Adam and Eve said so. God expelled the devil and his angels from heaven to earth. That's on the backside. All right, so we've got another couple of passages there. The one is that Satan is a spiritual being. And then I've got multiple New Testament references to who Satan is. And this is interesting too, because I looked up and got different names of Satan, some which have verse in Scripture, whatever. Tempter, Beelzebul, the enemy, the power of darkness, Belial, God of this world, prince of the power of the air, adversary, deceiver, dragon, ancient serpent, father of lies, murderer, accuser, the evil one, a roaring lion. Those are all words that are used to describe Satan here on this earth. Hebrews 2:14 clearly says Satan uses the fear of death in order to control us. And the writer of Hebrew goes on to say that Jesus took away that fear of death. Jesus conquered death, and in that removed a lot of Satan's power. Ephesians 1:21, because of Christ's death, Satan no longer has control. Paul specifically talks about the devil as an entity who has absolute strategies in order to tempt mankind, okay? And those are followed. There's a passage in Ephesians 6, which is a great passage to read. 1 Timothy 3:6 clearly talks about him playing on the young, mature in Christ. 2 Corinthians 11:14. Satan disguises himself as an agent of light. And then I threw in some stuff resisting the devil, how much you resist the devil. This devil who attacks people who are idle. This devil who attacks people who, by virtue of overdone church disciplines, tempts people when they're down. This devil who, in Corinthians, tempts you to sexually do wrong. This devil who, in 1 Timothy 3:6, tempts young leadership to pursue gain instead of true Christian leadership. And then finally, this devil who tempts even Peter. And the idea there that I was left with is that story. There's a line there that basically says, Jesus tells Peter what's going to happen. Of course, Peter says, no, it ain't going to happen to me. And Jesus' refrain is, yeah, Peter, it's going to happen to you, but listen, I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to pray for you that your faith will suffice to deal with this. I wrote down a couple, three or four things down here at the last that you can think about. Revelation 12, that's worthwhile to read sometime on your own. And then I got to thinking, before I left this, all the misunderstandings that we have about Satan. I say the misunderstandings, understandings that we have about Satan that I'm not sure where in the world they came from. Okay. You know, my picture, if I were to draw a picture of Satan, I think most of us would make him red. That comes out of Revelation. He's the red dragon. Okay. Most of them would give him a pointed tail and horns. That comes out of art in the Renaissance, where those symbols were symbols that were consistent with what the Roman god Pan looked like, who was a god of disaster. Okay. Anyway, you can pick some of that by John Milton in Paradise Lost. It's been since my days at Rhodes since I read that. That's only 50, 60, 55 years ago. Little long, but it's the same reading still. Or Dante and the Inferno. There's another goodie. And then I thought to leave you with this right here, which to me is very deeply theological, and you need to think about it. This is from Flip Wilson, who said, "The devil made me do it." And my question is, does the devil make you do anything? And the answer is no, he does not have the power to make any of us do anything. But he can sure tempt you to. So anyway, that's a quick rundown, Gerald. Does that help you at all, or give you?
Yep.
Well, I guess the question is, did it help you out?
Yeah.
You know anything more about Satan?
He's red, he's got a tail.
Your head, you got a tail, the devil made me do it. Yes.
Satan is not a single entity, because in Revelation 12, it says that Satan and his angels were thrown down. So there's not a single entity that wants to tempt us and wants to pull us from God. There's a whole team at
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. He's got his own angels that are helping him accomplish his will, his mission. So when Jesus looked at Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan." Now explain that. What do you think that was? Was he telling Peter he was Satan?
I think he was speaking to Satan through Peter, because Satan was using Peter as a mouthpiece for his mission.
Good. Anybody else want to venture off into that?
Sometimes, I'm not going to name any names, but I may call my wife by the name of one of her parents. And it might be in reminding me of, some of those things that we don't like that we see in each other.
Yeah.
That's not because I think she's one of them,
Yeah.
but I may be seeing a characteristic of them in her that.
Yeah.
That's a terrible thing to do.
I'm not.
Yes.
Marriage lessons by calling Kristen.
I know what would happen in my house if I did that. Yeah, that would be trouble. Either direction. If she called me, whatever. But it is interesting to think about that when you see evil or sin, or if we can kind of reflect back to think about how Satan works. Like in this little chart, I like this chart for a lot of reasons. One, it's easy to go into a spreadsheet if I want to. The temptations that he uses against us. Jesus was weak. He hadn't had anything to eat. And he tempts him with bread. When Adam was in the Garden of Eden, it was food that was his downfall. Not eating of that tree that was in the garden. And then when he talks in 1 John chapter 2, verse 16, he talks about our cravings as sinful man. The next one, God's love and will. We doubt where we stand with God. You know, devil was tempting Jesus with that. You know, do you think God's going to take care of you? And if your mind starts down that path, you can start maybe taking matters into your own hands sometimes. We do that. The lust of the eyes, things that I think I deserve. You know, even with Adam, he told him he wouldn't die. The devil came and told him a lie about whether he would die or not. Pride and power. You know, that temptation is definitely alive and well today. And we face that as well. Have all the kingdoms of the world. Jesus, just bow down and worship me. And he tempted Adam the exact same way. You'll be like God. You'll be like God. You just eat of this fruit. And then for us, the temptation is very, very similar. And when we look out into power and the things that we can get, all those are the temptation. I heard one person say, the devil doesn't have a whole lot of new tricks. He just reuses the same ones he's always used. And we either succeed with Jesus and his Spirit, and that's how Jesus succeeded, or we fail like Adam and Israel and mankind in general. Okay? What?
I think that just as God knows us intimately, I think the devil knows us. And, you know, if he came to us looking evil or whatever, we would know him and we would know to stay away from that. He knows all of our weaknesses. He knows when to come to us. So he knows, you know, he's going to come to us looking like something we want, something we might need, something, you know, that is going to look good to us when we're at our weakest with that particular thing.
Sure.
So, so that's when it's going to be hardest to resist that temptation or whatever. Because if he was the red pointed, you know, whatever with the tail and the pitchfork and stuff, we would know to run the other way.
Sure.
But we don't do that because he comes trying to fool us.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story, and I don't know if it's relevant to you guys or not. I mean, it means something to me because I remember it. Early in our marriage, Kathy and I had a pretty good argument. It may surprise you that we fight, but we do every now and then. But it was, you know, to the point where I decided to go take the garbage out, even though it didn't need to be taken out. And I'm riding down the road, going to the convenience center with this, and I'm thinking about us. I'm thinking about what's going on. And I can remember thinking, you know, the devil probably is sure happy that we're fighting right now. And, you know, I think the reason we're fighting has nothing to do with what us so much as the devil wants us to fight. And I'm not gonna let him win. I'm not gonna let him win. And so I went back to the house, having pointed him out, since he wasn't a tail wagging, horned creature. I just called him out in my own mind that he was there and he was pushing us to fight about something that didn't mean anything. So I went back into our discussion together. I didn't necessarily tell her what I called out the devil because she might think I was calling her out that way or whatever. But that the devil had a hold of her. I didn't say that. I just said, let's figure this out. And we did. Obviously we did. But I went into it with a whole different attitude. And so I think if we could pause in our life and think about what's going on and figuring out where God's at and where the devil's at, and then pick the right side. Jerry talked about that like 2 or 3 weeks ago. You got a choice. You can either follow God or you can, lose. Yes.
Have you covered James 1 yet
Not
in
today.
this discussion? James 1, 13 and 14?
Mm-hmm.
Let no one say when he is tempted, I'm being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted with evil. And he himself tempts no one, but each person is tempted. This is the key. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desires.
And those desires,
Power,
all of these things that we're listing on the left side are the things that Satan takes advantage of. All right. Let's move on to the next half of this discussion, which I think is also interesting. Matthew chapter 4, let me get my phone where it needs to be. We stopped at verse 11, right? So let's look at 12. And let's think about this for a minute. Then the devil, it says in 11, the devil left him and the angels came and attended to him. Okay? He was, before I leave that, we may look, and I actually said it earlier, that Jesus was alone out there in the desert. But he wasn't alone. The angels, the Spirit of God was with him. He had that. And so when we may be tempted thinking, I'm all alone, we got to remember that God is with us. Okay? Now, 12. I don't know how much time passed between 11 and 12. Keep that in mind. I think there was quite a bit of time between 11 and 12. All right? When Jesus heard that John had been put in prison, he withdrew to Galilee, leaving Nazareth. He went and lived in Capernaum, which was by the lake in the sea of Zebulun and Naphtali, to fulfill what was said through the prophet Isaiah. And he quotes it, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people living in darkness have seen a great light. On these living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has been dawned. From that time on, Jesus began to preach, repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near. All right, so he was called away. I guess maybe I could go back to the map. It says he was in Nazareth, so he was baptized somewhere down here, and he was up here in Galilee in Nazareth. He went and lived in this city, Capernaum there, and what I told you earlier was the 2 tribes of Israel are right in here. These are the 2 tribes. So that prophecy was fulfilled by him living there. So that's the story. So the Sea of Galilee, which is where he was at, was a fishing town. Shoreline markets, mixed communities. There was a lot. This area up in the north, I keep wanting to refer back to that map, but the countryside up in the north, the Assyrians were there. A lot of Gentile people. It's called the Galilee of the Gentiles in that area. So there was a lot of both Jews and Gentiles in that area. Probably more Gentiles than anything else in that countryside. It also says that, is this where it talked about it being dark? Being dark. Darkness was there. That country, that part of the world was pretty wealthy. I mean, the fishing industry was good. There was a lot of beautiful land in that area. But he called it darkness. And the reason for the darkness didn't have anything to do with whether the sun was shining, right? It had everything to do with the Spirit of God being there and the presence of God, the people of God doing what they were supposed to do. There was a lot of things going on there that made it a dark place. And the light was getting ready to start shining there. I'm curious about the timeline, okay? So now let's read on. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. And they were casting nets in the lake, for they were fishermen. Come follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once they left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, and they were in a boat with their father Zebedee preparing the nets. Jesus called them and immediately left the boat and their fathers and followed him. Every time I have read this story, I have assumed that the timeline was Jesus baptized, tempted in the desert, and then he went and he found Matthew or the apostles, or Peter, James, and John there, and they just followed him. And that was the first time that they had met Jesus. Am I the only one that thought that? All right, it's not true. I don't believe it's true. Unless John chapter 2, verses 1 through 2 through 11, it says that Andrew was with John the Baptist. Andrew was with John the Baptist, and Jesus came by. And when he came by, he said, "This is the Messiah." And so he left John the Baptist and started following Jesus. Andrew did. He also went and got his brother Peter. Y'all look it up.
Where is this?
John chapter 2, verses 2:1 through chapter 2:11. All right. He also went and got his brother Peter. And at that point, he changed his name from Cephas to Cephas, right? All right. Now, this is confusing to me because it says, and it's got it in quotes, that John the Baptist wasn't in jail yet. John the Baptist wasn't in jail yet.
Well, that follows the chosen.
Well, the chosen may have it right.
Well, I'm just saying because that was confusing to me.
Yeah, and I think they are right. Now, I don't know how far into the timeline it is, but I believe these guys were disciples of Jesus before he saw them by the Sea of Galilee.
Well, you go back to chapter 3, verse 13, Jesus came from Galilee. So I assume that they knew each other from just
Yeah,
being from the local area.
right. There are some people believe that these disciples were with, these guys were with him when he turned water to wine in Cana, and that he was with them for a long time. Now, what's confusing about it is, I don't know when they went back to fishing. They were fishing. They went back to their job to support their family, I guess, at some point. And so when he came down and he saw them by the Sea of Galilee, I don't think he was calling them to be disciples. I think he was calling them to do a special job for him, to be fishers of men. And fishers of men is something different than just being a disciple. And so I thought that, and I've got another slide here, and I wanted us to spend some time talking about it. Are we just keepers of the aquarium? Or are we fishers of men? What do you think I mean by that? Keepers of the aquarium would be what? You got everything in your little aquarium there, taking care of the water, just taking care of what's in there. And I think Jesus was calling them to not be keepers of the aquarium, but to get out, to go out, go where people are hurting, go where people are needing help, needing His salvation
beyond the building.
beyond the building. We've talked about this a lot, but the thing that I wanted to leave you with is we are disciples of Jesus. We are. But He wants us to be fishers of men. So we have got to figure out what is our responsibility. These guys weren't just being disciples and following Him around. They had a job to do. He wanted them to go do it. All right. Ran out of time. I want to spend some more time talking about that, but we'll hit it next week. We'll probably be in chapter 5. Y'all have a good rest of the day.